What is going on today, and how is your writing? This is Devin, and I'm an hour later than normal if you're watching us live. And today we are going to talk about the birth of Blumkin. Yeah, we're going to have an interesting conversation today. It's about, are you allowed to make up words? Are you allowed to have catchphrases that aren't actually part of a language? And so I'm going to give you a few examples of how this all sort of works out. And I think perhaps the starting point will be, and we're going to get a little metaphysical and a little weird on this episode. But so recently oh, by the way, Devin Galaudet, I am the editor-in-chief of In the Know Traveler and the author of the forthcoming book, 10,000 Miles with My Dead Father's Ashes, because his last request was to be scattered off the coast of Cadiz, Spain, and I lost the ashes. So, so it was worthy of a book. But this all said, can you make up words? So I have, over time, sort of developed this kind of odd little habit of writing things that sound like they should be a thing, but maybe they are and maybe they aren't. So an example is, in my book, I talk about this idea of meeting these girls, and I called them German Blumkins. So as it turns out, Blumkin is, for me, just sort of like an upbeat, chubby woman. That's about it. It wasn't meant as positive. It wasn't negative. It was just kind of like, sort of like that word sounded like the thing that I was trying to describe, and I couldn't describe it in a way that I was satisfied with. So I went with Blumkin. Is it a word? No, it's not. Although if you look it up, it is a heinous slang term. That said, I'm not referencing that. At the time when I wrote it, I was not thinking about this thing that the only reason why I found out about sort of like the slang term is because I looked up to see if there was in fact a meaning. It turns out there is. It's not what I was describing, not even in the least. But that said, when I wrote Blumkin, I had a certain image in my mind. Now, is that cool? I don't know. I mean, I wrote a few other words that my editor kind of like crossed out. Like, I think we're going to delete that. One of those words was actually one of my father's words, which he used to call blotto. And blotto is sort of like a belligerent state of drunkenness, where you're kind of not really quite in the room, you're blotto. And I don't know if that's a real word or not, but that said, it was sort of like a word that I had heard growing up. And so I used some of his language in my book. Are they real words? I don't know. So, a couple of them, the editor was like, and kind of said, I don't think we need this. So, but that said, I think German Blumkin, or the Blumkin, is in the book, right? Non-existent word other than my definition. So why is this an acceptable practice? And I think there's a number of reasons for it. For one, all of the words that we have in our language aren't necessarily intrinsically connected to the thing that they're attempting to describe. Meaning, the word house, as an example, doesn't intrinsically, on some sort of a soul vibrancy level, actually mean house. House is just something that, it probably comes from the German, and you can go back, thousands of years with it, and now we have the word house. But even thousands of years ago, it was sort of like something slowly had evolved and developed and became a thing. And I think that's how language evolves. As an example, this is, 35 years ago, not 35 years ago, about 33 years ago, I remember sitting in a bar and at some point getting in an argument with this guy that I knew. And I gave him the hand, right? Now, after I did that, we both started laughing because we both thought it was kind of like this very, very funny gesture, right? Speak to the hand. And then ironically, and I had never seen or heard of it before until we kind of discussed it, and it was just this kind of weird, ironic little moment. And it wasn't until like later, like on Jerry Springer, all of a sudden everybody's talk to the hand, don't talk to me. And it became this sort of like thing that became part of the vernacular, right? Now, it's not necessarily a real word, or it's not a real gesture, but it is, because it became part of pop culture. Now, maybe at some point in time, it's going to end up in some dictionary somewhere, talk to the hand, meaning X, get out of my face. So are we allowed to do these kinds of things? Well, I think at some point as writers, we should be doing that. I think we should be looking for ways that embrace creativity and invite our readers into the storytelling experience. Like, so even though I do not have like an asterisk next to Blumkin to give some sort of a definition, what I do is I think in its context, it makes enough sense. And I think sort of like the word sort of like sounds the thing that I'm attempting to describe. And I think that's in part how language develops. In a real traditional sense, there's lots of words that we have in English now that are, second nature that were non-existent 50 years ago. And as an example, the word like the internet is a word that we all know. I mean, we use it probably on a daily basis, or a USB port. I mean, these are things that didn't exist 50 years ago. So is it okay to use these non-existent words into our writing? No, I think it's absolutely necessary. I think it's probably most apt if you are writing science fiction, or you're talking about some sort of a future place and describing things in ways that would make sense in 50 years from now, not necessarily now. So can I write write something that I've done in the recent past and invent some words? Yeah, no, I think we do, and I think we create color to them. I would argue, just going back to the hand kind of thing. Matter of fact, another word I started using years ago was blather. It's kind of, I don't even know how to, it's just kind of like a saturated kind of thing, right? Like I'm just blathering, so words just covering everything. And I thought it was something that I made up, and maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but I heard it somewhere else. But so I'm not trying to take credit for it, but I think what happens is that when we as like a culture, and this is kind of where it gets weird, is that I think we start talking about things and ideas in different new ways, that words just sort of start organically popping up around us. Like I'd love to say, I coined talk to the hand, but the truth of the matter is, I think it was just part of the culture at the time. It was like a thing that was going to organically emerge, whether it was going to be a real thing or not a real thing. So all of this said, I think, and then finally, the final thing is that in Iceland, because Icelandic, A, is a very challenging language to speak, and two, that it's only spoken by about 250, 300,000 people on Earth out of 7.5 billion, they actively go out of their way to make sure that their language is preserved. So even though a word like computer is something that, if you go to any place on the planet, regardless of the language, and you say the word computer, everybody's going to know what you mean, because it's kind of become an industry unto itself, so everybody knows what a computer is. But because the Icelanders are so, A, they're very smart, and B, they want to protect their language so it's around for future generations and doesn't get overtaken by any number of languages, what they do is they have a committee, or at least they did when I was there, where people get together and they find the Icelandic equivalent of that language so the language can still thrive and grow organically when new things get invented. So do you invent a language? Sure, absolutely. It certainly worked on Game of Thrones. It certainly worked on Star Trek, because I think I know people who are still speaking Klingon. And the joy is that we can have fun with it. We can create our own language. We can create our own adjectives or descriptions or whatever it is that we want. And the thing is, I believe that if we do it in an honest, truthful way, we take the reader along with us. Like our reader will go with us if we give them reason to follow them along. Like I think if I said Blumkin and put an asterisk and put down at the bottom, here's a footnote, here's how I'm defining it, it's not a real word, you can consider to ignore it, nobody's going to buy it, right? But I said it in an organic way, and so hopefully that's something that is going to be true and hold true for the readers of the book who are just going to go along with it. Maybe I'll coin a new word. And if not, I'm going to keep writing daily. By the way, as always, please check the the boxes here. Please like it. Please share it with your friends, especially if it's something that you like what I'm doing, because then I know that I'm on the right track. As always, you can feel free to ask me questions about writing in any form of it, whether it be genre or how to market yourself and promote yourself. That's what I'm doing right now, every day, all the time, and I am writing daily. So anyway, that's what I've got for today. Oh, Laura, thanks for joining us, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys again real soon. Thanks so much for being here. Take care.